I want to welcome everybody to this event as part of EDID Week. The Office of the Vice President, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion welcomes you all to the second annual Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Decolonization Week. We are here to celebrate and honor our diverse campus community by featuring a variety of events all week long, ranging from accessible educational content to Asian heritage, eliminating racial discrimination, and much, much more. My name is Kate Hargreaves, my pronouns are she, her, and I am honored to be part of EDID Week behind the scenes as an administrative assistant in the office of the VP EDI, and to have the opportunity to introduce this morning's session. Before we get started, I'd like to highlight some additional events that are happening today that you may be interested in attending. The Belonging, Inclusivity, Diversity, and Equity Institute, that you may know as BIDE, is hosting their in-person Student Wellness Lounge launch from noon until 2 p.m., and that's located in Dillon Hall's main corridor and room 252. BIDE is also hosting their annual speaker series today, which will be held in person at the School of Creative Arts Armory's Performance Hall downtown from 7:30 to 9 p.m. tonight. And this year's speakers will be Sarah Mushtaq of Windsor Regional Hospital and Irene Moore Davis of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society. And wrapping up EDID Week, we have even more great events tomorrow. And to register and for more information on those, please visit uwindsor.ca/VPEDI. Introduce our speaker for this morning. I first want to offer a land acknowledgement. The University of Windsor is built upon the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. I acknowledge and thank the traditional custodians of this land for their wisdom and connection to this place, and we invite you into a tradition with us of acknowledging and remembering whose territory you are on wherever you are. This morning's event is about campus-based assault prevention, prevent, resist, and support. Just as a couple of housekeeping items, the chat, microphone, and video functions you may notice have been turned off for attendees of the session. However, we do welcome questions using the Q&A function on MS Teams, so you can feel free to leave questions and comments in the Q&A box located at the top of your Teams window. And Anne also lets me know that there will be an opportunity for those who wish to leave anonymous questions as well during her talk. So if you would prefer to do that, you can look out for that opportunity. And now to introduce this morning's facilitator, Anne Rudzinski. Anne, who uses she, her pronouns, is the Sexual Violence Education Specialist at the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention, Resistance, and Support. Her role centers around providing educational experiences about sexual violence, consent, and support at the University of Windsor. Anne is also responsible for the implementation of the Flip the Script program with EAAA at the University of Windsor and works with WENDO Women's Self-Defense to bring their programming to our campus. Anne runs the Prevent, Resist, Support podcast in addition to the social media presence for the Prevent, Resist, Support campaign. She's also the co-chair of the UWindsor Pride Committee. So without any further comment from me, I am very honored and happy to introduce Anne.
Thanks, Kate. That was such a great introduction, and I really appreciate it. Today, I have a slide deck presentation for you, and we're also going to use Mentimeter. So if you want to grab a cell phone or a tablet, or I think you can also access just from your computer, that's also great. We're going to be talking about campus-based sexual assault prevention through the lens of our Prevent, Resist, Support campaign. And I've seen that there are a couple folks in the audience that work closely with our office. So thanks for being here. You probably have already heard all these things, but I'm excited to see some friendly faces in our group today. So this is me. I work at the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention, Resistance, and Support. And if you haven't followed us on social media, we're on Instagram, Facebook. We're thinking about TikTok in light of the things that we've recently heard about TikTok as an application. We also have a really great podcast, so lots of great ways to get involved and see what we are up to. And today we're going to start with a content forecast. And so my perspective on like trigger warnings, content warnings, is that I like to use this frame of content forecast because I don't know necessarily what you would like to wear if it's raining. Like it's been raining a little bit, I think, today, but I can let you know that the rain is going to be happening or that we're expecting rain. And so that's kind of the approach that we take to giving folks a heads up on content. So today we're going to be talking about sexual violence and sexual violence prevention, resistance, and support, which means we are going to be talking about the scope of sexual violence that exists, but we won't be going into any in-depth details or examples of sexual violence today. We'll just kind of be taking a bird's eye view look at the problem itself. And then we'll be focusing more in on the things that we're doing to kind of tackle this problem on our campus. But before we do that, I wanted to start out with Mentimeter today. And so if everyone would like to go to www.menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen, it would be great to just start with a check-in and see how folks are doing today. The code is 78126818. And maybe Kate, you wouldn't mind popping that into the chat, or I might be able to, although I think the chat is also disabled for me.
I can put it in the Q&A so people can find it in the queue.
Great, thanks. Oops. Awesome. So it looks like folks are doing well today. But there's also a bit of like tired, sleepy energy. I'm feeling that as well. A little damp. Yeah, it's been kind of gloomy this week, which is, I think, standard for this time of year, but always makes me feel a little bummed out. But excited to see folks are feeling hopeful, fantastic, intrigued, calm, good. That's awesome. We're also going to have for our presentation today an anonymous Q&A, which is just on our next slide of Mentimeter. So although I won't always have that visible, now that you're logged into Menti, you have access to it. So our next slide. Be great if the Menti would let me switch slides. Oh, there we go. Questions, etc. So comments, questions, things you're curious about, please feel free to use either the chat function or the question function on Teams or the question function on Menti. The difference is that the Menti question function is anonymous, so I won't be able to see who has asked the question, which might be the case if you have something that's a little bit more like sensitive that you'd like to ask or talk about. If you would like to ask a question in a way that also attaches your name to it, that's great as well, and you can use the Teams function. So we're going to spend most of our time in our Canvas slide deck today, but that Menti is still running, and so if you want to use that option, you can use it at any time, and I'll check it at the end of our presentation today during our Q&A section. So before I get into kind of the problem and our approach to the problem, I like to frame the way that we think about sexual violence here at the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention, Resistance, and Support. We use two different lenses, the gender-sensitive lens and the gender-inclusive lens. And you can find more information about this on our website. It is from this really wonderful document called Our Turn, which is from a student-led project, I believe out of Ottawa, but I could be wrong about the Ottawa piece. But in any event, they framed this really well, and so we've adopted this into our work. So a gender-sensitive lens looks at sexual violence from the lens that it is a gender-based violence problem. So gender-based violence being the larger umbrella, sexual violence being within that umbrella. And the examples that I use to talk about this usually kind of look at the fact that the myths that we tell or like the kind of unhelpful or harmful things that we say about sexual violence when it happens to men are very different than the things that we say that are unhelpful or not true about sexual violence when it happens to women. And I think usually when I do this presentation in a classroom, I ask students for examples of these, and they've got lots of them. So for example, if sexual violence is happening to men, we might hear things like, oh, well, men can't be sexually assaulted, or they must have wanted it, or they were lucky just to like have the hookup, right? But when sexual violence happens to women, the unhelpful or not true things that we say often are things like, well, why was she wearing that? Why did she go there? Why was she drinking so much? The content of the ways that we talk about it is different, and the ways that it's experienced are also different on the basis of gender. So the gender sensitive lens is really crucial, and we'll talk about some of the statistics that kind of feed into that as well. But we also want to use a gender inclusive lens. So while we know that sexual violence is most often perpetrated by men, and most of the targets of sexual violence are women, sexual violence can be perpetrated by anyone and experienced by anyone. So we hold both of these lenses in our work, and you'll see me move back and forth between both of these lenses in our chat today. So, sexual violence is a well-recognized social problem. Oops. Every time I try to click the and move around the little video, it takes me out of the presentation. So I hope you can all still see the slides. Um, so sexual assault is a well-recognized social problem on post-secondary campuses. This is well known. This has been something that that folks have known for quite a long time. It's been demonstrated in a variety of academic research, and it's been something that we've been trying to tackle for quite some time now. And as the offices, like our office has come into being and have, kind of started to work on this problem, we've started solidifying these larger approaches that are a little bit more coordinated and comprehensive to address campus-based sexual violence. And so that's what the talk really is about today, is looking at kind of that broad scope of the problem, and then really looking at what are the variety of ways that we tackle it. So from the research literature and from Statistics Canada, we see that about 11% of women identified students report having been sexually assaulted in the previous 12 months. And about 3% of women identified folks in the general population report having been sexually assaulted in the same amount of time. So we're seeing that the rates are a little bit higher on college and university campuses than they are in the general population. We also know that in the research literature, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 is kind of the standard rate that we see for women experiencing either an attempted or a completed rape prior to graduating from their undergraduate degree. So quite a large population within our kind of broader population here at the University of Windsor. So although anyone can be a victim of sexual violence continues to be especially gendered, and that it largely is perpetrated by men against women, and that is a lot of what we see in our office and in our work on campus. Members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community also report disproportionately high rates of sexual violence, and again, like anecdotally, that is something that I have seen reflected in our work here on campus. So, why are rates of sexual violence higher at universities? There's a variety of different factors that go into this. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that they want to share in the chat or in the questions component. Kate, is there anything coming through in our Q&A? Yeah, I'm not sure. Kate, I'm not sure if you can hear me. If you can, you're on mute.
I'm just going to chime in here. We
Oh,
do
great.
have, yes, we do have a couple. Kate, do you want to come
great.
on, or would you? Maybe I can jump in here. Okay, so we have one response: because we allow it. Another: I feel that it is us because of party culture and fear of not being believed. And another one: age.
Yeah.
We have another one as well. Sorry, and I posted something in Menti: away from home and parties.
Yeah, no,
Those
those are great. Thank you for reading those out for me. Whenever I'm in presenter mode, I can't see the chat, so I appreciate that. So yeah, essentially what we're seeing is that folks are in a new setting, right? Like they've moved sometimes away from home, or are attending are in spaces that are away from home, whether they're commuting to campus and still living at home or living in our residences. We're seeing that they're in a new environment. And oftentimes they're also either going to places where alcohol is present or engaging in alcohol use themselves. And we know that alcohol use in the space is a factor that relates to sexual assault. Even if the person themselves is not drinking, it affects how other people in the space view things that are happening and their capability to intervene as bystanders as well. So we also know that the risk rate for sexual violence is the highest between the ages of about like 26 and 24, or sorry, 16 and 24 or 26. Around those ages is kind of where we see that kind of higher rate of sexual violence happening. And we also know that the first couple months of undergrad and very first year of university, around the time that students are going to orientation events, and up until about Halloween is what's called the red zone for sexual violence. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the things happening, oftentimes at like orientation events or parties or things like that. So yeah, thanks folks for participating in that one. So the question that's kind of the larger question related to our talk today is, how do we address campus-based sexual violence? And I'm going to walk through the different ways that we look at this problem and address it in our community here at the University of Windsor. So when we ask people, how do we stop sexual violence? One of the things that we hear the most commonly is, well, we just need to teach men not to perpetrate sexual assault. And sometimes folks say that as like, well, we just need to teach perpetrators not to perpetrate sexual assault. Sometimes folks say men, sometimes they take that broader lens. Regardless, at this point in time, we don't have any research and evidence-based programs that look at perpetrators. Folks have made attempts to create those kinds of programs in the past. There's all kinds of problems with why they're not necessarily effective or possible to implement. And so that's not a strategy that we use at the University of Windsor. And so instead, we look at this larger system of looking at a couple different ways to address the problem, knowing that we can't access that group of folks who are causing harm necessarily in the same way with our educational content. So one thing that we can do is inspire folks to act as pro-social bystanders and intervene. So looking at who else is in the space when the things are happening. Another thing that we can do is try to build consent culture and teach about consent and sexual wellness and take that like kind of positive approach to the topic. And then another piece is teaching women how to resist sexual violence. And there's a lot that goes into that ideologically. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move through our presentation today. One thing that we really know is that both the structural and cultural components that are a part of our system of sexual violence contribute to direct violence. So the structural pieces being policy, procedure, reporting options. So thinking about like the ways that survivors often have a really awful time reporting to police or navigating the criminal justice system, that all kinds of falls in the like structural piece. And then the cultural piece is about the things that we know to be true or believe to be true about sexual violence, the myths that we hold, the jokes that we tell, all of those kinds of pieces about how we discuss sex and relationships and sexual violence. And both of those things support direct violence. So direct violence is not happening in isolation of the broader kind of social and cultural factors in our community. It's very much embedded into that system. And so when we look at a solution to sexual violence on campus, we can't only target direct violence. We have to also be thinking about the structural pieces and the cultural pieces and how we really facilitate building that broader positive campus culture. So one thing that folks might be surprised to learn is that University of Windsor is actually a Canadian leader in addressing and preventing campus-based sexual violence by offering evidence-based and institutionally supported campus-wide programs, which is very cool. I did not know that when I came here to do my undergraduate degree, and was just very lucky to end up in a place where all of this amazing work has been happening for quite a long time. With our bystander initiative and with the Flip the Script with EAAA programs, there's lots of folks on campus who have been doing this work for quite some time and have been really investing in not just offering programming, but offering programming that is evidence-based. So things that have been researched, where they've studied and made really careful and thoughtful decisions around the content that's included and how it's implemented. And then really looking at the ways that it's institutionally supported on our campus. So we're not just offering programs, they're actually embedded into our campus in a really unique and interesting way that is not happening in the same way at other institutions. And so that's part of why our approach is really quite excellent. I know I'm kind of biased because I do work here in the Office of Sexual Violence, but we are doing some very cool things that are not necessarily happening at other universities. So the University of Windsor was one of the first universities in Canada to adopt the highly acclaimed intervention program, Bringing in the Bystander, which was originally developed by University of New Hampshire. And we've institutionalized that program via 2 undergraduate courses in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences that are cross-listed in a bunch of really amazing ways across our campus. So students apply for spots in our courses, and then through taking both of those courses, become facilitators for the bystander program. And then the programs that they offer are offered throughout campus. So the workshops are offered to folks in many different spaces on campus, mostly first-year students, but also students in second, third, and fourth year are still taking the workshops as well, which is very cool. And so then we kind of have this like really amazing feedback loop where every year we're, having folks take the workshop, they're maybe getting inspired to get involved in the course, and then we're producing new trained peer expert facilitators every year to kind of offer out that program on campus. And another really interesting piece is that it's been implemented and integrated into courses via a bonus point system. So folks who take the workshop can get bonus points in their classes for completing that educational component, which is a really big piece in incentivizing participation in the program. And so the goal is to focus on first year courses, although that's not the only place that we focus, but that is where a lot of our attention lands, with the goal of reaching first year students broadly on campus, which is very cool. So that's just a little quick pitch about how University of Windsor is doing some very cool things. When we've looked at our system of programming and services more broadly, we really ascribe to a public health model. So thinking about prevention before, during, and after the things happen. So thinking about what are the things we're doing that take place before sexual violence has occurred to prevent perpetration or victimization and kind of create those cultural shifts. And then what are the things that we're able to do once we know that sexual violence is already occurring? So what are the kind of short-term, immediate things that we can do to hopefully make things a little bit safer and a little bit better? And then what are the things that we're doing long-term after sexual violence has already occurred to support folks on our campus and hopefully remove barriers and come up with some accommodations and also potentially help folks access justice if that's something that they would like to do. So that's kind of translated into our Prevent, Resist, Support program. So Bystander is one of our newest additions. So Bystander has come under the Prevent, Resist, Support kind of umbrella within the last couple of years. So under Prevent, we have primarily the Bystander Initiative offering out those workshops and courses. We also have all kinds of different education on consent and sexual violence and sexual wellness. All kinds of resources, self-care, lots of stuff that kind of falls under that like preventative, positive culture building piece. And a part of that also is our Prevent, Resist, Support podcast. Under Resist, this is where we really think about if violence is already happening, what can we do to offer folks tools to resist that violence when it is occurring? So that's where we have our Flip the Script with EAAA program, bringing in WENDO Women's Self-Defense and the Acts of Resistance to us LGBTQIA+ self-defense program. And then lastly, support, so offering that direct client support, but also offering things like responding to disclosures training broadly on campus, making sure folks have the tools to respond to disclosures when they happen. And then offering things like our survivors and supporters groups where folks can come, whether or not they're a survivor, whether or not they would like to disclose that, and engage in some like community building and like wellness activity kind of space. So we'll talk about some of these things in a bit more depth, starting with the prevent portion of our strategy. So as I've mentioned, the Bystander Initiative has this really unique and unparalleled institutionalization. The program is evidence-based. We've implemented campus-wide. We actually have course credits now where folks can list our Bystander course as a kinesiology credit, which is very cool. And students have been really excited about that. So that's been really awesome. Our workshops are integrated across faculties. We have workshops happening in all kinds of courses across campus, and the academic courses, as I've mentioned, are cross-listed. And then we have this consistent supply of highly trained facilitators coming out of our courses. So we always have new students kind of coming up through the system and becoming these like peer expert, peer mentors that facilitate our program out to other students on campus. So like I've said, we have the workshop component, the bringing in the Bystander workshop, and then hopefully that inspires folks to take a course. And ideally they take both courses, the 3500 and the 4500 courses. And in the 4500 course, that's the practicum where they learn how to facilitate that workshop. And then they are offering out that workshop on campus and ideally educating more students and hopefully getting folks to take the course again. So it's a really nice system that kind of like feeds itself with student engagement, which has been really excellent. And that falls under our primary prevention piece because bystander really works in a couple of ways. One way is teaching safe and effective in the moment intervention strategies. So really looking at what can folks do in a safe way if they witness something, if they hear something, and a range of different scenarios from things like hearing a joke about sexual violence that they have the opportunity to say something about in the moment, all the way up to intervening in instances where direct harm is occurring between folks. We also have a piece where we're facilitating campus-wide social change around rape culture and sexual violence by offering out that education and, really talking about sexual violence with lots of different students and getting them to think about it in different ways and hopefully challenge that system a little bit and build a really positive culture. So it's a really unique program. It's really excellent and is one of the biggest parts of our Prevent Resist support structure. So we have this continuum that we show in the workshop, and we look at those like low-end cultural violence pieces, like the jokes that are being made, the comments, catcalling, all of that kind of like cultural piece around how we think about and talk about sexual violence, all the way up to those direct instances of sexual assault. So we're looking at a pretty broad spectrum of behaviors and giving folks tools to intervene across that spectrum, which is very cool. However, we know that bystanders are present in less than 20% of sexual assault situations that occur at that high end. Those direct instances of sexual assault often happen in isolation. And isolation is one of the kind of red flags or risk factors for sexual violence. So with that in mind, and knowing that social change takes time, we've got a lot of stuff happening to kind of create that larger social change on campus. In the meantime, sexual violence is still happening. We still have folks in our campus community who are experiencing sexual violence. And even though we've seen a lot of really wonderful shift with some social movements like the #MeToo movement around the way we talk about and think about sexual violence, we're not at a point yet where sexual violence isn't happening. So that's where the resist piece really comes in, looking at what are the things we can do in the moment to prevent sexual violence. So that's where we get our Flip the Script with EAAA Sexual Assault Resistance Education Program. It was developed by Dr. Charlene Sen here at the University of Windsor, and it is a rigorous evidence-based program that was tested with 2 different randomized control trials, which are kind of like the gold standard of program testing. And it's the only program to ever demonstrate measurable decrease in sexual assaults in the future for folks who complete the program, which is very cool. And I have a statistic about that a little bit later on, so we'll come back to that piece. So this is really that secondary prevention piece. What are the immediate responses we can offer when sexual violence is occurring? So we know that women can't prevent somebody from trying to harm them, but the research shows that we can teach them effective strategies for intervention. And the resistance piece is a little tricky. It's hard to talk about because a lot of times folks feel like, well, we should be teaching perpetrators not to perpetrate. Young women shouldn't have to take this kind of programming. And like, yeah, that's super fair. It's like not fair that as women, we should have to take these like long self-defense programs to give ourselves the tools to exist, in our communities. But that's also the reality of what's happening right now. We still live in a society that's not very safe. And honestly, if I can teach somebody an effective physical self-defense skill, I don't know why we wouldn't give them that tool if we haven't. So that's kind of some of the kind of ideology behind what we're doing. So Flip the Script is unique in that it's been designed for the youngest women on campus because they're at that highest risk for sexual assault. So those women in that kind of like highest risk rate of being about like 16 or 17 to like 24, 25, 26. So this is a 12-hour resistance workshop that looks at examining risk factors for sexual violence and specifically red flags that we might read from the environment or somebody's behavior that indicate increased risk. We also look at exploring the ways that we can be attuned to risk without compromising our sexual freedom or our sense of freedom. So we don't tell folks where they can go or where they should park or that they have to carry their keys in their hands when they walk alone at night, but we give them lots of tools to think about like where is risk happening realistically and what are the choices that you can make or what are the kind of factors that you can be aware of when you're making decisions to kind of make your own risk assessment. So it's really, really freedom based. That's a difficult part to kind of communicate out, I think, in our advertising, but it's one of the key tenets of the program. We also have a really crucial component to this program where we look at the barriers that make it difficult for young women to resist in situations where someone's being coercive. So there's a lot of kind of like social barriers to standing up and saying something, or to yelling at somebody, or to implementing like a physical self-defense technique. And that's part of what makes EAAA super effective, is that it actually works on those internal kind of barriers that we have to actually standing up for ourselves and doing something in situations. And that's, kind of a complex piece, but the content around it is really wonderfully written and is really thoughtful. We also look at goals, desires, and boundaries for friendships, dating, and relationships. There's lots of space given for folks who are not interested in dating or having relationships, and lots of space given to kind of like think about that in the context of what your own goals are. And then there is 2 hours of verbal and physical self-defense training using strategies from the Wendo Women's Self-Defense Program, that are really aimed at keeping yourself safe if somebody is trying to hurt you. So very cool that we actually get to offer like a little bit of that really targeted self-defense training on our campus. Participants also receive a resource kit for on and off campus resources. They get snacks and a lunch on both days. They get a certificate of completion. And realistically, one of the only ways that we've been super successful at getting folks to agree to spend like 12 hours with us is by saying at the end, we'll give you a little tiny cactus. And the young women really like that piece. So this program's offered, and we're running registration through My Success, which is really awesome. So if you know somebody that falls within that age group of kind of up to 26 years of age, we do have our last program running like 2 weekends from now. It's April 1st and 2nd. So the really cool thing about Flip the Script, is that for every 13 women enrolled in a Flip the Script program, 1 attempted or completed rape is prevented in the next 6 months. There's research evidence that shows that taking the program actually reduces the amount of sexual violence that folks are experiencing. And those effects last for up to 2 years after the program is completed, I think is the like very generous estimate given based on the research. So yeah, it's a really cool thing that it's just like super effective and really does the thing that we want it to do. It's really awesome. We also know that a lot of the young women that are taking the program are quite young. We're getting like a mean age of 21. And of those women that are taking the program, 32% were already survivors of sexual violence. And that's from some of the research literature. So looking at like when folks are enrolling in that program, a lot of them are already survivors, and the program is really careful to be supportive and not blaming, and really give them tools looking forward, and not, things to kind of look back on with guilt. We also offer a bunch of additional things under this heading, because obviously not everybody in our campus community is a young woman under the age of 26. So Wendo Women's Self-Defense is a self-defense program which is offered for women of all ages and girls 10 years of age and up. So we've had some really cool offerings where we've offered it out to staff, and some staff have brought their daughters, which has been really awesome. And we also offer Acts of Resistance, which is a self-defense program that looks at 2S LGBTQIA+ folks specifically. So really looking at those like gender-based components to sexual violence. And then Lancer Rec also offers like a broader self-defense course that anyone can take. So lots of different options on our campus to take self-defense training. And for everyone, this doesn't always feel like the best choice. And that's also totally okay. We have a bunch of other stuff that folks can engage in if they're not feeling like taking a self-defense course is the right choice for them. So one thing is that we have a bunch of different podcast episodes that look at like how the program was created, or what's included in the Acts of Resistance program, or what is it like to take a Wendo course. So lots of really great content available on our podcast. Also looking at the Girls Resist study, which is a study that Charlene Sun and her team are working on right now to offer this program to girls in high school. So looking at offering it to folks a bit younger, which is awesome. And then just taking it back for a minute to look broadly also at the kind of prevent heading. We also offer a bunch of other workshops, like Queer Sex Ed 101. We had a Sex and COVID workshop that we ran during the pandemic when we were all at home that kind of helped folks navigate their own choices and boundaries around sex and risk of COVID-19. We have a really great workshop on consent and sexual violence and boundaries in the workplace, and a workshop on dating and relationships that we developed in collaboration with the International Student Center that really looks at what is the Canadian context of dating and relationships, what are the things that you might want to know about dating and relationships if you're someone who's new to Canada, because unfortunately we've gotten some feedback that for our international students, there's a lot of coercion that happens around folks saying that things are normal in Canada when they are not normal. So we have that workshop functioning as well. And then we offer all kinds of events and things across the semester. So sometimes we get to participate in these larger events with other folks across universities in Ontario. So we can bring in these really big and amazing speakers like Roxane Gay. We also have lots of things that we offer on our campus. We participate in lots of different tabling events. We offer consent-themed Valentine cards at Valentine's Day. We offer out free safer sex supplies and menstrual products across campus. We do self-care kits. We offer sex ed bar trivia, which was like an at-home, like, participate in, and on Zoom, like participate in like a little trivia themed event around sex ed. So lots of really cool stuff happening in terms of workshops and things available to folks if they want to learn more about these topics. And then just a really broad array of topics covered on our podcast, which is really great because folks can access it asynchronously. So content on gender-based violence, racism and sexual violence, masculinity and men's experiences of sexual violence, supporting friends who are coming out as trans or queer. Lots of information. The one about menstruation is really fascinating. It really goes into depth on how menstruation functions in the body. And I learned things that I did not know, which was amazing. And we've got lots of amazing folks like Kendall Susie and Betty Barrett from our campus who have visited to talk about some of the work that they do and the things that they teach about. So lots of really great things happening on the podcast to kind of broaden our scope of the things that we're talking about in education. Which brings us to the support piece, which is kind of that tertiary level of we've done a lot of things to create a positive campus culture. We work with folks across campus to offer workshops and education opportunities. We offer self-defense training for folks that feel like they are not feeling safe and would like to build those skills for what to do in the moment. But obviously sexual violence is still happening. And so there are a lot of things we do under the heading of support to make our campus honestly accessible to folks that have still experienced sexual violence. So a lot of that work is about like, how do we make things a little bit easier and make sure that folks can still participate in our campus and still be here if they've experienced violence. So if you've heard the title, the Sexual Misconduct Office, that is also us. We did change the name of our office at a certain point, but the office really came about in 2016. There was this provincial government legislation that came out in Ontario stating that all universities had to have a sexual violence policy, and our office was born around the same time. And then in 2020, we had a sexual violence task force that was another ministry mandate and really looked at a set of recommendations around sexual violence prevention and support on campus. And then in 2021, we rebranded to capture, the scope of our work and to make our office title a little bit more in line with the language that we use more commonly. So sexual violence instead of sexual misconduct, and kind of reflecting that like prevention, resistance, and support lens. And during 2021, the Bystander Initiative was brought under management of our office. And so they joined our PRS umbrella, which has been honestly so great and really exciting. So in terms of support, we're really looking at long-term responses after sexual violence has occurred to offer solutions. So Jesse and I often describe this work as being professional problem solvers. So sometimes we don't know that we can do something until someone reaches out with a problem, and then we kind of poke around and reach out to the folks that we know in our campus community and find out that we can actually make a solution happen, which is very cool. So folks reach out to us. I'll talk about how to refer folks and how to get them in touch with us. But we offer ongoing care and support to survivors. We provide them with all the options possible, knowing that an experience of sexual violence means that somebody's control and options have been taken away from them. So we really try to give them as many options back as possible in our process. we try to problem solve, and sometimes that looks like coordinating accommodations, and those might be academic accommodations, like having a little bit of extra time on a paper because they've got some stuff going on that's been really heavy and makes it difficult to complete schoolwork, or writing their exams in a private and quiet space. So coordinating with student accessibility services to offer, writing through SAS for exams. All kinds of academic things. And then we also look at financial accommodations. So making sure folks have the financial resources to access the kinds of care and support that they need, or to help them out with some of the very tangible things that might be outcomes, like housing. Housing is another big one. So working with resident services to offer housing at times when people are feeling unsafe in their housing that they currently have. We also work a lot with other services and supports. We network out to lots of other community organizations to kind of bring in a variety of different supports to our students or to get them access to things in the community. We make referrals to counseling and healthcare providers, both on campus and off campus. We do lots of safety planning, so really walking through a very thorough look at safety on campus and off campus, and then offering reporting information and options. And so our approach to this piece is really that if folks are feeling curious about reporting, we would like to give them all of the information that they would like to have before making that decision. And then if they choose that they would like to report either at the university or through Windsor Police, then we can support them through that process. And so walking them through what that process might look like, offering support to them as they move through those processes, looking at what their goals might be for accessing justice through those processes and helping them decide where they might want to report. So a really wide array of things under here. I always say when I talk about this piece with Dusty that it's really hard to capture the things that we do in a list like this because it looks so different day to day based on the cases that we have. So there's a really wide array of things that we can do. And if there's ever something going on, we would always say that we would love for folks to reach out and, possibly collaborate with our office, check in and see if there's anything we can do to support or any advice that we can give, because sometimes we can do a really cool thing that we haven't figured out we can do yet until somebody asks us to try to do it. And then we learn about a really great resource or a really great option for folks. So we also offer a responding to disclosures training, which for staff, I believe ranges between 2 and 3 hours, depending on the version of the program that we give, where we go through our model of recognize, respond, and refer. So recognize, respond, and refer looks at recognizing that you're receiving a disclosure of sexual violence and understanding kind of how sexual violence happens and what it looks like in folks who have experienced it and kind of the range of ways that it can impact survivors. Then it looks at responding really tangibly, what are the helpful things to say and what are the things that are not helpful to say, and building some skills around saying something that's helpful when that disclosure comes up. And then looking at referrals. And so what are the resources that are available and how to get in touch with our office and all of the kind of obligations or pieces around that. So primarily this program exists to support faculty and staff, but we also offer this out to students as well to help them build that skill. So all of that to say, I have a couple of asks. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I would really like to get involved in contributing to positive social change around sexual violence on our campus, these are the things that I would say that I would really love if you did these things. And one of them you've already done, which is listen to our comprehensive strategy and kind of know about our office and be aware of the things that we offer out, which is awesome. So thank you so much for being here. The next thing is if you are somebody who teaches at the university, think about integrating, bringing in the bystander into your course. And that really just involves offering a bonus mark opportunity to students who complete the workshop. It's one of our biggest incentives for workshop participation. So offering that bonus point in your course is huge. And if you're interested in that, you can get in touch with bystander and I'll put up all the contact information at the end of our presentation. And then share our workshops and event offerings with your network of students. You folks access networks of students that we don't always know, and you're in so many different spaces across campus. So please tell students about our office and the things that we offer. We do have Flip the Script happening in 2 weekends, so not this weekend, but the one after, April 1st and 2nd from 10 to 5, both days. It's the last time that we're offering Flip the Script before September happens. So it would be really great to have that word go out to students. So take a look at our social media, take a look at our My Success, share out our workshop offerings with your networks. That would be so awesome and so helpful, because it's really hard to reach students across campus with all of the different things that they're being sent and all the newsletters and all the information that they get day to day. Take a responding to disclosures training or update your training if it's been a while. We're going to look at offering that out to staff and faculty really broadly again in the summer. So if it's been a while since you've taken that training, or if you haven't taken it yet, maybe flag that as a note for yourself and take that training when we offer it in the summer. It would be really great if we could get everybody across campus to have these skills to respond if somebody discloses an experience of sexual violence. Lastly, employees of the university have one requirement, which is that if somebody discloses to them, their responsibility is to provide our referral sheet to students, and you can find that on our website. And so basically just letting them know that our office exists. It's their choice if they would like to reach out to us, but saying something like, "Thank you so much for telling me. I'm really glad that you reached out. Have you heard about the Office of Sexual Violence? I'm going to give you their referral sheet. Up to you if you'd like to reach out, but that is a resource that's available to you." So you can find that on our website. It looks like this little graphic that I've put in the bottom corner, and has a bunch of resources for them, ranging from all kinds of things like the Crisis Center to medical treatment options and all of their options when they visit our office under our policy. So that's the overview of our prevent, resist, and support strategy for addressing campus-based sexual violence. I do have some time for questions, and I know we have our Mentimeter as well. But before I pop over to that and take a look at it, please consider giving us a follow on our social media. We're also going to be releasing a newsletter for folks on campus soon, so there will be a way to sign up for that, and I'll make sure that goes out through Daily News and all of the channels. So if you'd like to sign up for our mailing list, you'll have the opportunity to do that, and then we'll email out workshop and event kind of listings, and we will not send you a lot of emails, but if you would like to know about the things that are happening, we'll send out some communications about that. Lastly, I'm a part of a presentation that's tomorrow. It's called Helping the 2S LGBTQIA+ community thrive. And that's with Pride Committee and Thrive Committee on campus. And so if you're around for like a lunch and learn session tomorrow from 12 until 1, that is happening. It's also virtual and happening on Teams. So please consider registering for that. And with all of that said, I think we have some time now for questions. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to pop over to our Menti and see what I have in the Mentimeter. And hopefully also, Kate, you'd be able to help me see what we have in our Q&A, which would be great.
Sure. Yes. And my apologies for earlier. My Teams decided to crash on me at the least
Oh,
opportune
no.
moment. So I was over here clicking on the mic and nothing was happening.
Fair.
So I'm back. Hi. Thank you so much for that presentation. And we do have a question in the Q&A, and this came up, I believe, during discussion of the prevention piece or the prevent resist piece. So is there a program that teaches these skills for young men and women that are part of the queer community? Speaking as a member of that community who has been a victim of sexual assault, I really wish I knew some of the skills I have now when I was younger. So that's from our question asker.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's a really important one. And as a member of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, I feel really strongly about that. We've really tried to build that into all of our presentations. But specifically for folks that are members of the queer community, we have Queer Sex Ed, which looks at positive, kind of consent-based sex ed for adults that maybe didn't get that queer sex ed lens when they had sex education in high school. So that's a really fun, positive presentation. And then we do have that Acts of Resistance program, which is a self-defense program for 2S LGBTQIA+ folks. And so we bring that in. I think it's been virtual so far because the instructor is in Hamilton, but both of those are really targeted towards the queer community. So thank you so much for asking that one.
And we have one question that just actually came in just now through the question and answer as well. They ask, do you have similar programs for men to raise awareness among them?
Yeah, absolutely. So men are invited and welcome in almost all of our workshop offerings. The only ones that they're not able to attend are the Flip the Script and the Window. Bystander is such a great option for men to think about sexual violence broadly and learn skills of intervention. That's a really great program, and we really love having men participate in that. And we have a lot of young men who are really excellent leaders in that work as well. So bystander is the big one, but all of those programs, the like workplace boundaries, the sex and dating and relationships, all of those things are open to anyone regardless of gender. And so yeah, coming out to those things would be great. We also have a couple of podcast episodes that look specifically at men's experiences of sexual violence and at masculinity. And I just recorded a new episode that's I recorded it last week. I don't know the date that it's coming out, but it's about men's groups in high schools and the groups that they create for young men to talk about masculinity and sex and consent and all of those things. And so some very cool targeted content coming out soon. So take a look at the podcast, and I would say try to get into a bystander workshop if you're able.
Awesome. So those are the questions so far from the Q&A, but audience
Yeah.
members, feel free to put some more in there if you would like. And I know, Anne, you have the Menti going as well. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions is, if there's a concern that the person might retaliate, do you have further advice? And so I think that's really an important and interesting question, because I think retaliation, that could be viewed through a variety of lenses. So I'll try to go through that in a couple of different ways. So from the lens that if somebody's thinking about bystander intervention and you're worried that the person who's causing harm in that scenario might retaliate if you're engaging in bystander intervention, I think that is something that they look at in the bystander workshop and really give skills around how to intervene safely in ways where we're minimizing retaliation, where we're kind of working on like diffusing those situations. If we're thinking about retaliation in terms of self-defense and the worry that if people engage in self-defense, that someone might retaliate or engage in further violence, that is actually a really interesting kind of belief that we have about self-defense. And it's something that we talk about really heavily in our self-defense programs, the fear that if we fight back, somebody's going to enact more harm on us for fighting back. And the research shows that that's actually just not quite what happens. If somebody is intending to be violent, the level of violence that they enact doesn't increase because somebody is engaging in self-defense. But we look at all kinds of different self-defense techniques that also include like blocks, for example. So ways to kind of block somebody if they are trying to, harm us. And then the piece about retaliation in terms of reporting and accessing support, if there's a concern that somebody's going to retaliate, if you reach out and access support or if you report your experience, that's a big concern that folks often bring to us. And we have a lot of experience with helping folks navigate that. So looking at safety planning, being really careful and thoughtful about, how we move through a support process, how we move through our different reporting options, and what safeties and protections we can put in place for folks when that's happening, is definitely something that Dusty and I navigate very regularly. And so if retaliation is a concern, I hope that kind of looks at a few different ways that might be something that folks are thinking about. If you're experiencing the concern that like something might happen and somebody might retaliate if you try to defend yourself or protect somebody else, or if you try to bring forward a story about something that's happening, please reach out, because we can talk about that and like navigate that together. I have two more in the Menti, but I'm seeing that we're still getting some in Teams, which is great. And if you have some that you'd like to put in the Menti, it's still open. So please feel free to still participate in that space. The next one is, if someone experienced a sexual violence experience off campus or before they were enrolled or started at the university, can they still get help? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Honestly, we don't turn folks away. So even if this isn't quite the right resource, because somebody isn't a member of our campus community at all, we usually still chat with them and try to help find them the right place to go. There's a couple different layers in this question. So I'm going to start with, if somebody's experienced sexual violence off campus, that's still covered in our policy. So if the violence is happening to somebody who's a part of our campus community, they absolutely can access support through our office. And if the person causing harm is a member of our campus community as well, even if the violence happened off campus, that's still covered under our policy. And so there are reporting options that are associated with that. And, like no obligation to report, but all the options, and we can kind of walk through what those are. If somebody is experiencing or has experienced sexual violence before they were enrolled or before they started working at the university, yeah, we can absolutely still support and give you all of the options that we would give to somebody who experienced that while they were here. The only difference is that that probably doesn't fall under our sexual misconduct policy. So it might not relate specifically to being able to access justice through a university process. But we can look at what the other options for accessing justice might be, or we can just look at support and safety and programming and all of those wonderful things, totally up to whoever it is that's reaching out. But yeah, absolutely. If things are happening in different spaces or at different times, still reach out because we still want to support and try to figure out how to network all of that support for folks. So that's a great question. Do we want to take one of the ones that has come through on
Sure. One of them is just a shorter one. The person who asked about the workshops for the queer community, their internet booted them. So they're asking when you will be offering the workshop for members of the queer community as they're interested in taking both that workshop and the disclosures workshop. So if you
Yeah,
have
so
an idea
just
about
to-
timelines.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate, we have the Queer Sex Ed, which we don't have on the books at this point. We're kind of at the end of our educational year, so we don't have these things on the books coming up shortly. We also have Acts of Resistance, but again, we don't have that on the books right now. We don't tend to offer a lot of programming in April, and we're right at the end of March. But if you're interested, I would say join our mailing list, and then we'll be able to kind of notify you as soon as we have those things booked. We will be offering responding to disclosures throughout the summer, so if that's something that you would like to take, I think we're going to be offering that probably maybe like late June and also July. So that's kind of the timeline for those ones. So yeah, thanks for asking
Great.
about that. And like, feel free to send me an email because I'd love to chat more about that.
And the other question that we had come in says, do you feel the campus safety plan has been effective? And what more do you think can be done to create a safer campus under this model?
Yeah, so I'm curious what campus safety plan that refers to, if there's like a specific safety plan or like the broader things that we're doing on campus to address safety. I don't know, Miriam, if you want to like pop on the audio and answer that, up to you. Because I can give a more general answer or more specific
I
answer.
don't think the mics don't work for attendees right now, but
Oh, shoot. Okay. That's
but
fine.
if she wants to put it into the Q&A, I can also push that through.
Yeah, great. I feel like the thing about safety plans is that like different things work for different people. And so it's kind of it's tricky to come up with something that is campus wide that feels like it hits all of the nuances of what we would want it to do. The thing that I would really love to see if I was in charge of a campus safety plan and had access to resources would be to fund Flip the Script because it's the only program that is effective research-wise at reducing sexual violence, and getting funding for that program is always a bit of a struggle. And so if I had like one ask that I could make to make campus safer would be to give the funding for that program, give funding to bring in Wendo more regularly and to bring in Acts of Resistance more regularly, because there is a cost to bringing those folks in from out of town to offer those workshops out. And so it really comes down to funding. And so if there was anything that I could advocate for, it would be like, please give us money to run the workshops and to offer out all the things. That would be so great. I have another question, which is, what if someone is assaulted in another country while on a university-sponsored study abroad program? So the things that happen off campus are still covered under our policy. Where it gets tricky is who the other person is that is involved in the situation. So figuring out what our options are if something has happened in another country or in another space. We're still here for support, and we will absolutely do everything we can to figure out what our options are for reporting. There's a lot of really specific kind of nuanced pieces that go into what our options are. So if that's something that happened, I would say just encourage that person to reach out to us, because it really is our job to kind of figure out what can we do in that situation? So often that looks at inviting that person to share their story with us if they're comfortable, as much or as little as they'd like to, and then figuring out what some of those nuanced pieces of information are so that we can kind of figure out how to navigate the system and what we're able to offer out. So yeah, if somebody's experienced something in another country while on a university-sponsored study abroad program, like please reach out to us because we're here for all the support and we will try to figure out what all of the options are also for reporting. Yeah, these are great questions, like very nuanced and thoughtful, interesting questions about things that I don't always get to speak about. What do I need from students to get the funding that I need? I really need you to show up to our programming. That is such a great question. I love that there's like a contacting, petitioning, or harassing gently. Like, thank you for that offer, but I actually would just really love it if you told people about the programs and got them to attend. Because I think what happens with sexual violence programming is that we have this belief that like we're safe and that the other people in our lives are not safe. And so we're like, I'm glad we're offering that for other people, but I don't need to attend. So what I really need people to do is like listen to the podcast, register for a bystander workshop, sign up for Flip the Script or Acts of Resistance or Wendo or whatever, it is that we're offering, because we can advocate for more funding if we have numbers. And sometimes it's about taking those programs to learn how to protect the other people in your lives. If I could get everybody on campus to take a bystander workshop and a responding to disclosures workshop, like that would change our campus culture so significantly. So I really need people to register for the things. So by being here, like that's a huge thing. Thank you for doing that. Please tell your like classmates or your friends or folks in other spaces that you're in about the stuff that we're doing. And maybe like offer to go with them and say like, hey, let's take a workshop together. I think that's a great way to get folks involved. But I would really love for people to just like, please come to the things. That would be great. And yes, the programs are free for students. The only cost that exists is for the self-defense courses. There's a $20 like deposit that you pay to hold your spot that you get back in the end. And that's just because we see that folks register and then don't attend, and there's a very limited number of spaces because they do physical self-defense. And so we just need folks to like guarantee that if they're signing up, they're coming. And so we ask them for a deposit and they get it back at the end. But essentially, yes, they're all free, which is very cool, because if you try to take a Wendo or an Acts of Resistance course outside of the university, it costs like I think between $200 and $250. So that's like a real cool free opportunity that folks have on campus. And maybe also like you want to collect all the certificates, because you get certificates of completion for all these things and they would all look so good on a resume or a CV. So yeah, that's my pitch. Please come to the things. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? I feel like we have a little bit more time if folks have other
Can I
things
ask a
they would like
question?
to know.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely. I love that.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you and folks who are working in your office and doing your programming, how you, for yourselves or for the students who are working in bystander, navigate that emotional labor while providing the support.
As soon as you asked to ask a question, I knew it was probably going to be that question, and I love that. So yeah, we've built, and I can't speak as much about bystander because I don't interact directly with our facilitators for bystander, but I will speak for like Dusty, Jess, and myself here in the office, and our larger team, which includes Frankie and Danielle, and also our Flip the Script facilitators and some of the other folks we bring in. We just really try to build a culture of actually really caring about each other and checking in and having time for like socializing when we have meetings. So like asking people about their day and like what's going on in their lives, and then building this really lovely culture of being able to like ask for what we need and take time when we need to take time, and checking in for folks that have been in Dillon Hall. I have a case right now that's really complex, and people come and check on me all the time and they're like, how are you doing with your really complicated case? And that's just like so important and so lovely. And I feel like if we did more of that checking in with folks, I think that would be awesome. We also have like access to counseling services that are provided to us, and just like a really lovely culture that's built on work-life balance, which I think is crucial. So not the same kind of like productivity or like really intense, like kind of capitalistic view of like get all the things done and do more things. And there's the kind of really lovely culture of like, how are you doing though? And are you taking time off? And Dusty really encourages us to take a lot of time and to manage our hours and not go over hours, and to say no to things. Like there's a really lovely culture that's built around that. It has to be, I think, kind of permeated through all of the work. So it's hard to always identify like exactly what those things are when I'm asked that question, but we just have a really lovely kind of culture that's been built around our work. And that really honestly comes back to Dusty and her management style, which is really excellent. So yeah, thanks for that. I also
Sounds
eat a lot of
wonderful.
pizza. So there's a lot of pizza, a lot of coffee. Yeah, a lot of snacks, a lot of napping.
Plants, also cacti, right?
A lot of plants. And a lot of my biggest thing I think is finding like space for joy and like playfulness, because I think this is a really heavy topic. So I'm always trying to figure out like, how do we like do something that's a little bit like silly or funny? Like, can we like wear funny outfits for like our Valentine's Day event? Or, can we like make like a really funny video to put on our social media? Or I've got somebody in our office suite that's going to help me to like hide like a little statue of like a garden gnome in somebody's office for them to find, and like that's going to be maybe like a little funny thing that we do. So like funny, like playful things that are not like making fun of anyone or harming anybody, and are kind of like fun, just like ways that we experience joy and like playfulness at work, I think are really important.
Thank you for that. That is wonderful.
Thanks.
Does anybody else want to add any questions in either that Menti or the Q&A? Just give you maybe like a couple moments to do so if you would like. And while we're doing that, Anne, do you have any closing remarks that you want to give, or any anything that we didn't touch on in the session that you want to add based on the questions or anything?
No, I mean, I think the questions are so excellent. I think I would just really say, if anything is going on in your life that feels not okay or uncomfortable or gross, and that relates to like dating or sex or like things that are in the workplace that relate to like sexual things that are unwanted or any of that kind of stuff, anything that you think might be related to our work, please reach out. Like, we are always really grateful when people reach out and are always really glad that they're doing it. We always want folks to know that our service exists. We would love to give folks the support when things are happening. And if it's not happening to you and you're just not sure how to navigate it, like maybe you have a weird situation going on between, there's like a bit of tension that's happening in like your classroom between some students, or like you're not really sure, you've like become aware that there is a complaint process and you just don't know like how to support that person through that process, or any of those other things. If you're not sure how to navigate it, please reach out, because we would love to just like provide support and advice. Or if you just want a space to like come and eat snacks and drink tea and like vent about things and just be really angry or cry, like that's also a space that we offer. So just like the kind of like gentle invitation to like, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. Also maybe follow our newsletter or our mailing list when it comes out. And like be in touch. Yeah, we would just love to like see all of you on our campus. Stop by sometime. We have so many stickers. Like, come and get some stickers. That would also be great.
Thank you. That is, I'm sure lots of people will stop by now, especially for tea, stickers, and good vibes. So
yeah, good vibes or bad vibes. Like, I'm also here for the like, you got bad vibes. Like, that's fine too. Positive vibes only is not a phrase that we subscribe to here.
Oh, definitely not. Oh, and we have a question about where is the office?
So we are located in Dillon Hall. We don't give away our exact location, but I can like organize drop off if folks want to like come and get a sticker. Just send me an email. I'll let you know where we're at. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Anne, for your important work, for sharing it with us today. And thank you to our audience for your wonderful questions and all of your engagement. That also means a lot. And just to talk a little bit about what else is happening with EDID Week, we have some more events today, as I mentioned at the beginning. So we hope to see folks soon, as we will be making our way over to Dillon Hall, as previously mentioned, but this time for BIDE's in-person Student Wellness Lounge launch, which is happening today from noon until 2, and that's in Dillon Hall's main corridor and room 252. And again, that information, as well as other information about our events, is going to be at uwindsor.ca/VPEDI. Also, BIDE has their event tonight that I mentioned at the beginning. You'll find information about that. Their speaker series is happening tonight at the Armories building, the School of Creative Arts building downtown. And tomorrow, for a kind of closing day of EDID Week, but by no means our final day of talking about supporting EDID on campus and beyond. And will be joining us again, as she mentioned, along with Jocelyn Larudo and Ash O'Neill of UWindsor Pride and Thrive, for an event about helping the UN 2S LGBTQIA+ community thrive. And that's again from 12 until 1, and that'll be happening on Teams. And we also have a panel from 3 to 4 o'clock, also on Teams, about migrant worker healthcare in Windsor-Essex County. and an in-person trivia night happening tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with the Black Leadership and Excellence Program. So plenty of events still to come in EDID week this year, and we hope to see you there. And thanks again, Anne and everybody, for being here, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And just like big thank you to your whole team for organizing this. I think it's so excellent. We love EDID week. So yes, thank you for that. And someone asked for, I don't know if folks can see the questions, but I put our email in the questions in this one. So yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for organizing.
Thanks. Have a good day, everybody.